Welcome, everyone, in those that are in the room, those that are online. Thank you for being here. So this session is being recorded, is being broadcasted, and you are all invited to respond to the poll questions so we can know where you are attending from. Thank you for being here with us today to hear this CC presentation on environmental justice work, and more specifically about the EJ4Climate grant program and the Communities for Environmental Justice Network project, also known as the CJN project. My name is Violaine Pronovo. I am the lead community grant programs at the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, and it's a real pleasure to be sharing the stage today with our invited speakers, Jackie Metcalf, Orion Krigman, Jose Torcal, Perry McLeod-Shabagwagik, Jeff Renfro, Morley Kozak, Jaciel Soto-Torres, who will be joining us virtually. Our panelists today are from organizations and communities from across North America, and they all have been collaborating with the CEC through our grant programs or the CJN project. Today's presentation is a unique opportunity to hear about environmental justice-related stories from communities they work with. As you may already know, storytelling has the potential to advance environmental justice by giving a voice to the least heard, bringing visibility to issues, and permitting to share community-led expertise and lessons learned. It has the power to drive change, connect people emotionally, share hope, and motivate others that may share similar stories and concerns. We believe that this presentation will provide an interesting overview through very concrete examples of what is being done in North America at the very local level in terms of community involvement and empowerment, to increase people's resilience and advance environmental justice. We will certainly learn and be inspired by those stories. I remind that this session is being broadcasted, and I welcome again our virtual audience. Can I see the results of the poll, please? So we are always curious to see where our audience is attending from. So, it's even between Canada and the United States, and some people from Mexico as well. So welcome to everyone. Thank you for being with us today. So also I wanted to mention that this session will not take questions from the public to ensure that a maximum of time is allocated to hearing the stories from our speakers. Since questions and comments are always valuable, members of the public can share them via the online form using the QR code that is located on your chair or in the chat for those online. And those questions will be passed on to the panelists. So please don't forget to include your email address if you want to be contacted for the response to your questions. So let me start now with the first segment of our presentation. So we will talk about I forgot to change the slide. So we will now talk about the EJ4Climate grant program. So this grant program was established in 2021 at the initiative of the United States. EJ4Climate aims to support environmental justice by facilitating the involvement of communities to prepare them for climate-related impacts. It targets underserved and vulnerable communities and indigenous communities. Through the past 3 funding cycles, 42 projects from Mexico, Canada, and the United States received financial support from EJ4Climate. Those projects, led by communities and/or local organizations, are addressing specific environmental justice issues and implementing exemplary solutions and empowerment strategies that are worth sharing. 4 projects will be presented today. We will first hear Jackie Metcalf from the United States. Jackie is the executive director of the Texas Health and Environment Alliance, whose project empowering and vulnerable communities to prevent toxic chemical exposure from climate change events was recently awarded as part of the third cycle of EJ4Climate. Over to you, Jackie.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, wonderful. Well, the last time I was here in North Carolina, I was a geology intern working under a grant from the Federal Environmental Management Agency that studied factors that facilitate and hinder resilience, both in Texas and here on the coast in North Carolina. And being from Houston and studying geology, I felt that I was disappointed, and a little disadvantaged because I didn't have glaciers or volcanoes to study. However, I soon realized that the coast I called home was one of the most threatened coasts in the world by both natural effects and man-made problems. In 2011, local news reports claimed that Houston's tap water was radioactive, and I had a semester-long case study, so I decided to study the water at my family's home. During this time, I was incredibly sick, and I was actually 50 pounds lighter than I am today. I was losing my hair. I'd lost use of both my hands. I was having about 7 seizures a week, and doctors could not figure out what was causing my ailments. When I tested our water, I discovered the presence of heavy metals and other contaminants. Then I had my body tested for heavy metals, and 19 were detected. I started researching like crazy, trying to figure out what was going on in our environment, what could be making us sick, and how we could protect ourselves. I discovered that my family's dream ranch was nestled in between 4 toxic waste sites or Superfund sites, and that one of them was in the river that I grew up swimming, fishing in, and boating on. All of the health problems that my family and our animals had experienced no longer seemed coincidental or random. Believing that if the environment was making my family sick, that others in our community would be also facing health struggles, we began going door to door, trying to talk to our neighbors about their health, which is a little something to just talk to strangers about. But we found that many of our neighbors were struggling with autoimmune disease, reproductive disorders, cancers, and birth defects. And we believed not only our community had an increased rate of disease, but a serious toxic exposure problem. It took years for us to convince the state of Texas to study our health. And when they finally did, they studied 17 types of cancer, and 14 of those came back at abnormally high rates. They found that children were losing their vision to a rare eye cancer and even their lives to this cancer that was over 16 times the state average. They found a rare birth defect prevalent in our community where babies were being born with their digestive organs outside of their bodies. And we learned that 30% of pregnancies in my community had at least one adverse health outcome. With clear concerns about how the environment was affecting our community and our health and what we could do about it, my mother and I started attending EPA meetings for the Superfund site in our river, the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site. The pits were dug on the bank of the San Jacinto River in the 1960s, and they were filled with paper mill pulp, which contains dioxin, said to be the most toxic chemical ever known to man. The pits were abandoned, and by 1973, daily tides, along with storm surges and river flooding, carried the toxins into our environment and into our food chain. I'll never forget Hurricane Ike. In 2008, it was a direct hit for our community. And after the storm event, the mayor came on the news and he said, if you're on a public water supply, boil your water. Well, we had a private well that went hundreds of feet underground, and we thought we were good. Even though sometimes we pumped it after the storm, we could see particles in the water and it had a thicker consistency at times, but we simply didn't know any better. By the time the EPA started informing our community that we were eating contaminated fish and swimming in a river with uncontrolled dioxin waste, people were not only sick, but they were extremely upset. Public meetings were filled with emotional responses, and residents lacked the capacity to understand the technical jargon that was being brought their way by the agency. I knew something had to be done to try to break down this information and help my fellow community members understand the process and their legal rights to participate in the public process. Another important component was for everyone to understand that the EPA was not the target. They were the decision maker who had the only one who had the ultimate power and authority to bring resolution to this toxic issue. Through scientific research, community organizing, and media outreach, we've actively pushed for the expedited cleanup of the Waste Pit Superfund site. With nearly half of Texas's Superfund sites in the Houston region, we aim to leverage our expertise to address additional sites. So as you can see on this map here that's on the screen, this is the map of the area that was studied for the 17 cancer rates. And the zones with red were zones that were found to have abnormally high rates. And then the yellow and black circles indicate where the toxic waste sites are. Today, we're working in 3 communities and helping them combat environmental injustices and clean up old waste sites that endanger public health. The communities are diverse, ranging from communities of color to elderly white communities and communities with a disproportionate number of children under the age of 5, which is one of our most vulnerable populations, and communities where half of the residents are Spanish speaking. While we've long understood the threats posed by Superfund sites, we more recently became aware of what are known to be old relic sites, and it's an emerging threat to our communities. The map on your screen here shows not only the Superfund sites in our county, but also the relic sites. So our region is known for its oil and gas industry, but a lesser known fact is that we manufacture over 80,000 chemical compounds. Due to the absence of zoning laws, smaller industrial facilities popped up throughout the area as the sector grew. Over time, many of the businesses closed or moved, and communities were often built on top of or next to these old industrial facilities. There are nearly 2,000 relic sites here in our county. As you can see, they are littered across the whole region. In other parts of the US, these sites were often found in low-income communities and communities of color. However, in Houston, the sites span all income levels, but are predominantly in communities of color. There's no incentive for the companies to conduct investigations to see what chemicals remain on site today, and most residents are unaware of their proximity to Superfund or relic sites. This situation creates a perfect storm. Our land is sinking at about 3/4 of an inch per year. The Gulf of Mexico has risen faster in the last 13 years than it did in the previous 50 years. And with the risk of the toxins being exposed by the increase in flooding and the 2 previous mentioned items, there is an imminent risk for our communities to be exposed to these contaminants. So with all of this combined, we knew we had to go back to the drawing board to figure out how we could bring resolution and how we could scale to the size of the problem. And what better way than to help the locals? We've recently launched an initiative supported by CEC where we will create interactive data sets and maps for communities to understand what threats are present. Additionally, we're developing environmental health literacy training to equip our future leaders with the tools necessary to effectively navigate their communities through these environmental issues. Not only do we want to clean up these old sites, but we want to create a framework that can translate to any community's environmental justice fight. I'm appreciative of this event here in Wilmington because at the end of the day, our problems will best be solved together. Just last week, Tropical Depression Alberto made landfall in Mexico, but on the upper Texas coast, the coastal communities experienced 4 feet of flooding. We truly are in this together. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jackie. Yeah, it's a very inspiring, it's a very terrible situation that your community is living, definitely, but your work is very inspiring, and thank you so much for sharing it with us today. So we will go to the next slide, and we will pass the clicker to Orion. So we will invite now Orion Krigman from the United States to present. Orion is the founding executive director of the Boston Food Forest Coalition, whose project, Community-Led Food Forest Development for Climate Resilience in Boston, was also recently awarded as part of the third grant cycle of EJ4Climate. So over to you, Orion.
Okay. Good morning. Wow, it's loud. We are not going to stop the climate from changing, but we can come together to create justice as it changes. This is perhaps the most overwhelming and the most urgent task of our time. We are already living in Boston in a climate change city. As we know, summer 2023 was the hottest on record globally. Summers 21 and 22 were the hottest and most humid in Boston. But this heat and humidity is not felt equally. Due to racism, Boston's Black and brown neighbors live in neighborhoods with 20% less parkland, 40% less tree canopy, and an average daytime temperature disparity 7.5 degrees hotter than predominantly white neighborhoods. So imagine instead a Boston where a network of urban parks replaces vacant lots from Mattapan to Dorchester to East Boston, capturing carbon, capturing rainwater, cooling the urban heat island. The tree canopy provides growing children and their grandparents and everyone in between access to fresh food. All neighbors living within blocks of green space. Imagine a more equitable and climate resilient Boston. Boston Food Forest Coalition acts at this intersection of racial justice and climate resilience, transforming vacant lots into green spaces, also known as food forest parks. We address the critical need for new green infrastructure rooted in community. For me, this all began when I was living in Eggleston Square. Every morning on the way to the train, I walked past a trash-strewn vacant lot, speaking to every neighbor I met. Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué querrías para este espacio? What would you want for this space? Together, we decided to clean up the lot. We removed used tires, TV sets, car parts, nip bottles, hypodermic needles. It was a stone soup effort. Without a budget, we planted apple trees, currant bushes, raspberries, grapes, and native flowers to attract butterflies and songbirds, a real nature-based design. When a young man was shot and murdered in front of our growing community orchard, together with his friends and family, we planted a blueberry bush in his honor. A light bulb went off for me. We were growing so much more than food in these spaces. We were growing relationships between neighbors of diverse backgrounds, of different cultures and languages, different races and classes. Resilience is knowing each other. But if we did not own the land, all this good work would be uprooted. So we created a nonprofit community land trust to own the land together in perpetuity, and we named it Boston Food Forest Coalition. Using this model, the coalition has grown to 11 food forest parks and counting. In my story, you just heard 4 key strategies working synergistically. First, we identify local leadership, and we partner with these local leaders. And today we're in 8 active conversations with community leaders planning to transform vacant lots into food forests. Second, community ownership. We buy the land from the city of Boston for $100, and we hold the deed, so the land is owned by the community in perpetuity. Nature-based design. Research shows that urban forests and green canopy planted thoughtfully can lower air temperature in city neighborhoods by 10 degrees. Stewardship and education. The same local leaders who designed the parks become its stewards, planning soup nights, music festivals, birthday parties, and more. Boston Food Forest staff act as the backbone. ensuring a network of food forest parks for future generations. And because we are a community land trust, the board of directors is set aside the majority of the seats for the same local neighbors who are volunteering to care for the parks to serve on that board, so that it's always an accountable mechanism to the folks who are active in their neighborhoods caring for these spaces. When we began in 2015, I was the unpaid executive director. Now we are a team of 8, conserving over 130,000 square feet of urban land. With over 60 dedicated volunteer stewards, this work is reaching thousands more. And as the climate crisis worsens, we are growing. More and more people are knocking on our door saying, how do I get involved? What can I do? We have more interest and demand from local communities than we can respond to. There are over 200 vacant parcels owned by the city of Boston that are not suited for commercial or real estate development and are ready to be transformed. The opportunity is huge. But the limiting factor is people and financial resources. We need more capacity. We need more capacity to expand the number of parks, support more stewards, and grow our board. Our plan is to add 3 new food forest parks each year to reach our goal of 30 parks by 2030. With this critical mass, we believe the culture of the city can be transformed. If you imagine every park with its own harvest festival, and every park taking the abundance that it creates, and the stewards have been gifting them through churches and homeless shelters to people in need. So we're on a growth trajectory right now, and we've determined that by doubling our annual budget to $2.6 million, we can triple our impact. The time is now. Community resilience is climate resilience. When I think about what brought me into this work, I think about my young daughters. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old daughter, and they are passionate about the natural world. And they are very aware of the fact that the way we live is not sustainable. They ask me every day, why do we drive? Why do we use air conditioning? Shouldn't we stop using oil? And for me, what is critical and what is important is not to give false hope. I think there's a type of older politician out there who believes and communicates that all we have to do is adjust our subsidies and invest in the right technology, and we can go on living as we've always lived. And that sort of hope is a lie. It's hopium. And it's made a lot of climate activists angry and declare that hope is superfluous, or that hope is a bad thing even. But when I look into my daughter's eyes, how can I bring children into the world and tell them that it's hopeless? It doesn't feel legitimate to deny the need for hope. So for me, these food forests are seeds of hope. Hope is not something that we have. Hope is something that we gift to the earth, that we water, that we tend, that we support it to grow, and we pass it on to the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Orion. I just wanted to mention that I had the opportunity to visit Orion this spring in Boston. So I think that we went through 2 or 3 food forests. And believe me, those sites and the community, working together around those sites and living there, enjoying those places. This is very, very inspiring. And I really hope that we will see this project, this initiative replicated in other cities, because definitely there is a lot of potential here. Okay, so now we will turn it over to Jose Torcal, who is the project lead at the Mexican organization Isla Urbana, and Perry McLeod Shapgwikik, who is knowledge keeper from the Nipissing First Nation in Canada. So they will present the bilateral project, One Water, Somosawa, for which they collaborate and received a grant during the second EJ4Climate cycle. So over to you, Jose and Perry.
Bonjour. Anzo ke Disneyka shage do dem bising donjaba Nishnabe and Dao. My Anishinaabe name is Anzoked, which is a storyteller. I'm from Nipissing. I'm of the Crane clan, and I'm a Shkabewis, a helper, traditional helper in my territory. The picture you see on the slide is of my homeland, the place where I was born, where I will die and become part of the land and the water and everything else, part of my creation family. This place is a place where my family also lives. And this picture you see here is that of my grandson, Shkudeninj. Shkudeninj means fire hand. This picture here, if pictures, speak 1,000 words, this one speaks more, at least to me. And so it should to everyone else. This picture displays, the history of where I come from, the history of my people, but also the future. And the future is in that little guy. He is why I do the work that I do. I try to work as hard as I can, and even more so now. That lake that is in front of him is Lake Nipissing. It's 20 miles long, about 8 to 10 miles wide. And when I was young, we used to play hockey in the bays and the shores. Used to skate across the lake when it froze over in the fall. Since climate change has happened, we can no longer do that. The ice still forms, but it's not good ice. It's white and dark, full of cracks and bubbles. So we can't do the things we used to do. When I was young too, playing hockey in those bays, when we were thirsty, we would take the blades of our skates and cut holes in the ice and drink the water. And it was fresh and wonderful, beautiful tasting. We can't do that anymore. When I was asked to take part in One Water, Bejik Bish, that's how we call that, One Water, I was excited to partner up with my friend here, Jose, and my brothers and sisters from Mexico. And when we look at the territories in Canada, mine as well, water is everywhere. But we can no longer drink that water as we once did. Over 90% of the First Nations across Canada do not have access to fresh drinking water. So when the opportunity came to work with One Water, which is a rain harvesting project, we jumped at the chance. When I was young too, we used to collect rainwater. It was called soft water. We could drink it, we could use it to wash ourselves, to cook. It was a part of how we accessed water. But over the years, we got away from that. Well water was hard. A lot of our communities now have those water treatment plants and well water access, but it's not the same. In our teachings, we are told that the thunder beings, the ones who visited us yesterday, if you didn't notice, are the ones who conduct and who are given responsibility to put that fire of life in the water. Not only in the water that comes from the sky, the water on the ground, in the earth, inside of us. Water is everywhere. And the fire of life is put in that water. So we use ceremony to communicate, to give thanks, to acknowledge those beings. And again, one of the beautiful things about One Water was that they embraced spirituality as a part of the work that has to be done. It shouldn't be in isolation from science and politics and all these things. It needs to be at the heart. And so when we visited Mexico, my wife and I, we got to travel to the different sacred places. We did ceremony while we were down there, as well as visiting those project sites where harvesting projects were being done and got to help in building some of them. And so the One Water project to me is very important because it speaks to many things, speaks to many levels. And I want to thank Jose and his team, his family, for inviting us to be a part of that. And as Jose will refer to in his part, they will be coming to Canada, and we will be sharing that and building some sites in our community and bringing them into our ceremonies. I'm even going to take them moose hunting while we're there. So I'm excited to be a part of this. I'm honored to be in this space and to be on the traditional lands of the people of this place, to be allowed to come here and to be with you. Oh, miigwech.
Which Perry, thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Gracias a Perry, gracias también a la CCA por la
Thank you
oportunidad
so
de
much. Thank
presentar
you,
el
Perry.
proyecto.
Thank you to the
Como
CEC
decía
for this
Perry,
chance to introduce the
el problema del
project.
agua en
As Perry
Canadá
said, the problem of water in Canada
gravísimo.
when it
Y
comes to
quizás es menos
access
evidente que lo
by
que se ve en México.
Indigenous peoples and
Esta
First
foto en la
Nations
comunidad
is
donde yo
extremely
vivo
serious. It might
muestra
even be less
tangible
evident
que hay
than it
restricciones
is
del
in
agua.
Mexico.
Hay
It's
infraestructura
tangible
como
that
esta
there is
que
a water
es diseñada
crisis.
para
There are
captar agua y
structures like the
diversión
one we see
Hay familias
on the
tanto en medio
screen.
urbano
It is
como en medio
designed
rural,
to capture
medio
rainwater,
indígena
but
que
it never
no
fills up.
recibe
There are
agua
families
unas
and
horas a la
populations
semana
in
o
rural and
unas horas al
indigenous
mes.
areas that
Entonces,
might
el
receive water
problema
maybe for a few
es
hours, a
ver ahí
week, or even a
materiales
month.
grises más
The main
tangibles.
problem
E igualmente también es
here
muy tangible
is very tangible, but we also
ciudadana
see
alrededor
how
de
tangible
cómo
citizen
afrontar esta crisis.
participation is
Aquí
when
vemos
it
en
comes
este
to
mismo
facing this
municipio
issue.
a tres mujeres que
In this
son
municipality, we
quienes
see
conforman el comité del agua.
the
Ellas
three
se encargan
women
de
that are
gestionar
part of the
el
water committee.
mantenimiento
They
de
are on the
la poca red
photograph.
que existe,
They
la distribución del
maintain
agua en
what little
camiones como
network there
este,
is,
pipas,
water supply through
y todo lo
water
que tiene que ver
tanks and
con
water
el uso y
trucks.
gestión del recurso.
And it all has to do with how
Igualmente
they
hay
manage the
organizaciones
resource.
como
There are
Isla
other
Urbana que llevan más de
organizations
una
like
década
this,
instalando sistemas
like
de
Isla
captación de agua
Urbana,
limpia por todo el
which has
país.
been working for
Estos
over a
sistemas,
decade
más de 30,000,
in capturing
familias
rainwater all
ser
over the country, and they have
autosuficientes
supported over
y
30
dignamente
families
por
in
6,
being
8 meses del año. Simplemente captando y
water-based
almacenando el agua lluvia que cae
self-sufficient,
sobre
and they have been collecting the
Entonces,
rainwater
cuando
that falls on the rooftops.
tuvimos la oportunidad de... Así fue como surgió el proyecto de One Water, Somos Agua.
Now,
Vimos que
as
desde
One Water
México
came up,
había un
in
conocimiento en
Mexico,
los
we already
indígenas
had
muy fuerte sobre cómo
very
almacenar, captar
strong-rooted
y almacenar su agua
knowledge
y
in
lluvia.
our
Y
indigenous
desde Canadá,
communities about
el
how to
Nipissing First
collect
Nation,
rainwater.
hay
And the
una
Nipissing
experiencia muy
First
sólida en
Nation in
cuanto a
Canada has very
gobernanza,
strong
manejo de manejo
experience in
de recursos
governance, in
también
resource
autodeterminación.
management, and
Entonces,
also
la idea de este proyecto de
self-determination.
One Water,
So the
Somos
idea
Agua,
behind
es
One
que
Water,
las
or
dos,
Somos
las
Agua,
dos partes, las tres comunidades de
is that
México y la
all
comunidad
three
indígena de Nipissing
communities
puedan
in
colaborar
Mexico
y
and the
compartir
Nipissing
sus
community can
experiencias.
collaborate and exchange their experience.
Este proyecto, One Water,
This project,
involucra
One
4
Water,
naciones, 2 países,
involves
el sector
4
público, el sector privado.
nations,
Es un proyecto muy
2
complejo y
countries,
diverso.
private and public sector. It
Está
is
Nipissing
very
First Nation, que
complex
está
and
representada
diverse.
por
We
Perry
have the
hoy
Nipissing
de
First
Canadá.
Nation
Hay 3
represented by
comunidades
Perry here
indígenas de
today from
México, que son la
Canada. We have the
Rarámuri,
3 indigenous
la
communities in
Mazateca y la
Mexico, the
Wixárika,
Rarámuri,
que no han podido venir hoy.
Wirrárica, and Mazateca,
Pues gracias.
who were
Está
unfortunately
Isla
unable
Urbana,
to
que
be
es
here
la asociación
today.
civil
Then we
que
have
se dedica a
Isla
la captación de agua de
Urbana,
lluvia,
the
la
civil
Universidad de Toronto
organization in charge of
y
the
Canadian
projects, the
Social Consultants,
University
que es
of
una empresa de
Toronto,
ingeniería
and the
civil de Canadá.
civil engineering company
Entonces, quisiera
from
aprovechar la
Canada
oportunidad
that
para
is also
agradecer
involved. I want to
a
take
la
this opportunity
CCA
to
por su
express my thanks to
flexibilidad
the CEC for their
administrativa y su
flexibility in terms
apertura para
of
este tipo de proyectos
administration
que
and
deben encajar porque son muy
how
diversos y muy
open they are
complejos.
to these sort of
Estamos
projects, which are
agradecidos por eso.
sometimes hard to fit in
Y
because
en
they're
este
very diverse and
contexto
complex.
es que se creó One
Thank
Water.
you.
Entonces,
Under this
el año
context,
pasado,
One
como
Water
decía
was
Perry,
created, and
una
last
delegación del
year,
Nipissing
as
First
Perry
Nation
said,
visitó
we
México
had the delegation from the
y
Nipissing First
durante
Nation
8
come
días
to
estuvimos
visit us in
conviviendo.
Mexico
Las 3
for
comunidades
a
indígenas de
week,
México y
where the
Nipissing
3 indigenous
colaboraron, se
communities and
asistieron a
Nipissing
talleres,
worked
a
together.
charlas,
We
pero
had
sobre todo
talks,
se
we had
compartió, como ven
workshops.
la foto, en el
But
hostal de
as
Oaxaca en
you
el que
are
nos
able
estábamos
to see in the
quedando,
photo, there was this
literalmente
hostel in
sentamos
Oaxaca where we all stayed,
cada comunidad.
and we invited the community to come in. The microphone is off,
Sí,
apparently.
sí, sí. Entonces,
Okay, we're
quitamos
back.
los cuadros de la pared y cada comunidad pudo
So we
presentar
took
el trabajo
all
que
the
ha
pictures
hecho
off the walls so
localmente.
that the communities could
Después, la
show
parte
the
que
other
más
communities what
enriqueció.
they have done
Sin
locally through this
embargo, no nos
presentation,
quedamos a nivel
which was very
teórico
enriching.
intelectual,
But
también
it
tuvimos
did
una
not
sesión de
all
trabajo
just
en
remain
que todas y
as
todos los
theory.
participantes del
We
proyecto
went into
pasaron un día en
practice,
Oaxaca
and all the
instalando un
participants
sistema de
spent a
captación de
day
agua de
in
lluvia.
Oaxaca installing a
Me
rainwater
recordaba
collection
Violen el otro
system.
día que ese
Violin
día, año
reminded
pasado,
me the
era
other day that
Labor Day
it
en
was
Canadá, el Día del Trabajo, el festivo.
a
Y
year
mi
ago
querida ella
today.
que
It
nos
was
estaba
Labor Day
visitando
in
pasó todo el
Canada.
día trabajando,
It was a
cavando
holiday,
pozas,
and she
instalando
herself
bombas.
spent the day
Era como
digging
ir de nosotros
ditches and
haciendo el
installing
trabajo desde el
pumps. And
día
it was
uno
so ironic
en
that
Oaxaca
everyone
y al
worked
final del
on
día
Labor Day
llovió,
in
pero como un
Oaxaca.
milagro porque
And
pudimos
it
ver
was
el
miraculous
sistema
because
de
we had
captación, el
rain, so we
funcionamiento y
were
ver cómo ese
able to
lugar
see how the
quedó
system
pues
works and
equipado
how
para
this
poder almacenar
location
y
was
captar agua de
equipped
lluvia.
to
Y
collect
finalmente,
and
como decía
store the
Perry,
rainwater.
este
And
año
as Perry
las tres
said,
comunidades indígenas
this year all three
van a
indigenous communities from Mexico will travel to Mexico to install the collection system in Canada.
Sí, sí. Como decía Perry, ¿sí? ¿Me escuchan?
The microphone
Sí,
keeps
¿no?
cutting
Sí, sí,
off.
sí.
There we go.
Ok. Como decía Perry, este año las tres comunidades.
As Perry said, again, the communities in Mexico,
Parece que no quiere que viajemos. Sí, viajamos. Sí.
the microphone is failing.
We want another minute.
Sí, sí. Ah, gracias. Pues como decía Perry, ya acabó.
Right. So just to
Este
close,
año las tres
as
comunidades
Perry
indígenas de
said, the
México van a
three
viajar
indigenous
a Nipissing
communities
First
from
Nation
Mexico
para
will be
instalar 2
traveling
sistemas
to
de
the
captación de
Nipissing
agua de
First
lluvia en
Nation to
Nipissing,
install 3
adaptados
rainwater
al
collection
contexto
systems,
cultural y
of
climático
course,
del
adapting
norte de
to their
Canadá.
own
Entonces,
historic
en la
and
siguiente fase del
climate
proyecto estamos
context in that
muy
area in Canada. So for
emocionados
this next part of the
con ganas
project,
de ya
we are really
de seguir.
excited and we look forward to our visit and to moving forward.
What's our time? Just in closing, can we flip back to the picture? To the first one? There. Oh. Just in closing, I wanted to thank all of you for being here today. Would have liked the chairs to be a little more filled. The nature of, this situation we are in, but those who are here are meant to be here. And I think the work, and I've heard the conversations of, the different things that we're all doing. We're all helpers. We're all doing our best. But the fact is we have to work harder. We have to do better. And, in that work, I've heard of the word hope. And as my friend over here spoke, that we need more than hope. We need action along with that hope. And I know we need to work in a collective, which is true, but individually, we all have to also do that work to change our lives in a way, to walk on our mother differently, softer, with more care, helping her. All living things were given instructions, different ones, but some were the same. And one of those instructions was to take care of our mother. And we were given a brain of all the creatures, the gift of thought, of ideas. We have not applied that in the best way all the time, but we have an opportunity to do that. All of you are doing that, and we need to spread that good medicine, because it's that good medicine that will give that spark of life to hope, to be able to give to our children and our grandchildren. In our communities, that lake has a personality, has a spirit. We know her. Every bay, every island has a story. Each of us has a story and a song, and everything has that. And it's through those songs and ceremony and those vibrations we connect to creation, and we're able to ask for that help. We cannot do this alone. We need help from all beings, not just the humans. And it's through our ceremony and our prayers and our songs across Turtle Island and the world, that we need to include that in what we do. It's important. Oh, which.
Miigwech, thank you so, so much, Perry and Jose. So it's true that I had this opportunity to be with you last September. I worked hard, but I know that you work harder than I do. You know that the nature of the CEC is to carry out trinational work. So your project, which is bilateral, binational, is such a good example of the kind of work that we want to be able to carry out. You know, this exchange, this encounter, this is so important. Even with the barrier of language, I was able to see people, you know, connecting, and I was like, do they know each other for months or what? No, just for a few days. But yeah, that was very, very interesting. So thank you so much. So I will now invite our last speaker in this segment. So I will ask you to switch to the next slide. So you will note that this graphic looks different than the previous ones. Jeff Renfro is the director of Rio Bravo Restoration, an organization based in the United States that was supported through our other CC's grant program, which is called the North American Partnership for Environmental Community Action, also known as NAPICA. NAPICA was created in 2010. And for your information, the most recent recipients from the seventh cycle of funding of NAPICA were announced last Friday. So NAPICA supports community-led projects that are not exclusively about environmental justice, but a lot of the work being carried out by NAPICA grantees addresses environmental injustices and involves underserved and vulnerable communities. The NAPICA project that will be presented today, which is another bilateral initiative, was supported through the sixth cycle of NAPICA. So over to you, Jeff.
Well, thank y'all for being here and for having me. This has been really eye-opening for me to sort of look at, I'm a restoration ecologist, but to sort of apply a environmental justice lens to what I do and get the perspective here has really been energizing. Our project, we've got a lot of partners, and but I want to talk specifically about the fact that we've worked very closely with the Comisión Nacional de Áreas Naturales Protegidas, CONAP in Mexico. They're the managing agency of the protected areas of Campo and Maderas del Carmen, where the communities that we work are located, and they've been involved at every step of the way on this project. And really, we couldn't have done it without them. We also, almost every aspect of our project is built upon work that they started, and we've sort of taken that and tried to bring it to the next step. We've also had a huge amount of help from the National Park Service on the Texas side of the river, which is the borderland is right there where Big Bend National Park is on the river. I moved to that area in 1990 to work as a river guide on the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo in Big Bend National Park in 1990. And then I kind of fell in love with the people in the place. And I had a background in resource management work. And so around 2003, I just started volunteering on resource management trips. This is one here with a bunch of people from managing agencies. And then by 2011, I was doing this full time. And then in 2015, started Rio Bravo Restoration. But the important part about that is during those years, I built really strong relationships with people from the managing agencies, from NGOs, academics, but most importantly from the ejidatarios that live on the Mexican side, from the communities, because we spent months in the field doing hard physical labor together, working on restoration projects. And I began to learn about the challenges that they had, and sort of the asymmetry of conditions along the border there. These are an incredibly resilient and resourceful people, but they live in a place where really your only option is living off the land, and the landscape is severely degraded. Overgrazing, climate change, all sorts of challenges. There's no grid power in the area within hundreds of miles. Very limited access to regular infrastructure, water, fresh food. And so when the opportunity to apply for the NAPICA grant came around, my first thought is, well, I'm a restoration ecologist. This is not what I do. I plant trees and I monitor and I do other things. But, when you look at it through an environmental justice lens, it's actually exactly what we do. The health and the fate of ecosystems and the people that live in those ecosystems are one and the same. And ecologists often overlook the fact that humans are part of ecosystems. We sort of view humans as this outside disruptive force. But that's not the case. They really are a part of ecosystems. And the other important thing is that restoration work is very value-based. I mean, we choose the outcomes that we're trying to achieve when we do restoration work. And the most important stakeholders and the people that should have the biggest voice in those decisions about what our outcomes are going to be are the people that live there. So when we had the opportunity to put together a project for NAPICA, the first thing that we did is we went to these communities and we talked to them and we said, what do you need? What do you want? What can we do? How can we help? How can you help? And we really formed a partnership going, and it was built on that trust that we had from laboring together in the past. And we already knew each other, we were friends. So we kind of came up with a two-pronged approach, if you will. One of them was to try to address some more immediate needs. So we've done a lot of work with solar to address the lack of power issue, and or there would be a lot of places where there would be systems that no longer work because people couldn't afford to replace their batteries for their system. We put solar systems in 5 schools that had solar systems that no longer worked because the batteries were no longer worked. So we've done that. We've trained people to install solar. We've created a buying cooperative to make solar more affordable. We fixed people's solar systems. We've done work with gardening, building capacity for that, and helping people get things to garden with, the water catchment and things like that. And we've made a lot of progress there. The other thing that we did is another more of a long-term deal is that we created the Grupo Comunitario de Conservation, which is like the GCC. They're a group of local people from the ejidos that we've trained to do restoration work. We've trained them on the river to work, to operate upland. We've done monitoring for rare cactus. There's all sorts of work with these people. And it's done a couple of things. One of them is it's created good paying work, and it also helps build enthusiasm and buy-in for restoration work in the future. But the really important thing is it's kind of like a build it and they will come thing. You can't get the funding and the money needed to do large landscape level restoration to address these like severely degraded landscapes, grasslands that no longer support the ranching lifestyle that they need to be able to survive there without the capacity to do the work. So we've done that, and we've made good progress there. But the NAPICA grant is very much of it's seed money, really. So now we're at the point where we have to take it to the next step, and there's a lot of challenges to scale up this project. In reality, this is probably a 20 or 30-year project, and who knows how much money to actually fix this huge degraded environment, or at least create enough resiliency that people can live there. And that needs to be done by building partnerships. There's a real huge issue with, it's a lot easier to go find money to do restoration work in the United States than it is in Mexico. So, we're working on that, but it's a constant challenge. And we have had some luck. We need to keep building partnerships. We're a small organization. We need to bring in and partner with as many people as possible. We've had tremendous support from the National Park Service in the U.S. side of the river. We just got $150,000 from the Biophilia Foundation to start 5 grassland restoration projects that were in each of 5 ejidos. And we've got Bat Conservation International has given us money to do restorative ranching seminars. So we are making some real progress there, and I think that kind of builds upon itself. But when you start a project like this, you kind of make a promise to the people that you're working with, and so that's my big challenge right now is to make good on that promise. Another big issue is that when I talk to people that are doing similar work in other areas, and I tell them I'm working with ejidos, they just are like, "What are you, crazy? You can't work with ejidos; they're impossible to work with." And it's difficult because they have difficult politics within the ejidos and then between the ejidos. But we that's a big challenge, but we're making a lot of progress. We're just trying to get people in the entire area to look at it as one big project. And it's happening. And then just, for the future, I mean, we're in this for the long term. We've got a huge challenge ahead of us. We're just trying to put the communities at the center of the work, give them the capacity to manage and run their own projects and take initiatives and just be in control of their own destiny. I don't think I ever, anybody want to see my slideshow? I forget. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot. Yeah, this is just an early trip with a bunch of managers, National Park, CONAP, other NGOs. And this is where I started getting excited about all this and learning about stuff. This is a little school in Jaloncillos Grande. Very common thing during the pandemic is schools would close down. Nobody would water the batteries. They came back after the pandemic. Nobody had electricity. So this was actually just a project with NAPICA money and actually friends and other people. We just bought new batteries and boom, we got these guys back up online with, but we've installed systems at several other schools. And this has really been a great thing for building trust. This is the Grupo Comunitario de Conservation. We're actually training here. That's the Rio Grande. So they're standing in Texas and we're pulling a tree over in Mexico. But it was just kind of a fun dynamic photo. This is a really cool photo. The woman there on the left is doing a restoration project planting candelia, which is a plant that has economic value, and they're trying to do like a fair trade cooperative to do that. So it's kind of economic empowerment and restoration. And then this is Raimundo. He's like one of my favorite guys. He's part of the group also, and he's got a great garden. This was at a gardening seminar that we did with CONAP. So anyway, there you go.
Network. Okay. Thank you so much, Jeff. You're right saying that we cannot take care of the environment without taking care of people living in that environment and making sure that they have what they need to be able to take care of the environment. So this is what we can call empowerment. So this is a very great example. Thank you so much. So thank you to all our speakers. So we will now switch to our second segment of this presentation. Entonces, escuchando a sus presentaciones, nos damos cuenta de cómo
By
cada una
listening
de
to your
estas
presentations,
experiencias
we can realize
compartidas,
how each of the
aunque
shared
estén bien
experiences,
únicas por sus
even
propios
though
desafíos
these
y
are
contextos,
unique due
se
to
puede
their
aprender
own
mucho.
challenges and
Como
context,
lo
we
decía
can learn a
antes,
lot
hay un
from
gran
them.
potencial
As
de
I said before,
empoderamiento
there
en el
is a great
intercambio de
potential of
historias
empowerment
y
in the exchange of
seguramente lo podemos
stories,
ver como una
and
forma
this
de
for sure
apoyar y
can be seen as
fortalecer
a way to
la
support and
capacidad de las
strengthen the
comunidades
capacities
indígenas,
of indigenous
locales,
communities,
en
local
situación de
communities,
vulnerabilidad
in
o
vulnerable
desfavorecidas
situations
para
or
abordar las
unfavored situations
preocupaciones
to
en materia de
address
justicia
the
ambiental.
concerns on
Es con
environmental
ese
justice
objetivo
matters.
que se creó el
So with
proyecto
that
Red
purpose,
de
we
Comunidades
created
en
the
favor de la
project
justicia ambiental.
Community
A través de
Network
este
for
proyecto, la
Environmental
CCA ha
Justice.
apoyado la
Through this
creación de
project,
una red
CEC
trinacional
has
para
created a
facilitar el
network to
intercambio de
support
experiencia y
the
conocimiento
exchange of
comunitario
experience
y
at
orientación
community
práctica
level
entre
and
comunidades y
practical
organizaciones.
guidance
La
between
primera actividad que
organizations.
se
The
realizó
first
como parte
activity
de este
that was
proyecto
carried out as part
fue
of
un
this
taller
project
trinacional
was
que
a
se celebró
trinational
en
workshop
Oaxaca, México,
carried out
en
in
noviembre
Oaxaca,
pasado.
Mexico,
El
November
evento
last
contó
year.
con la
The
participación de
event had the
representantes de
participation
13
of
organizaciones y comunidades
participants
de
from
toda América del
13
Norte, con
organizations
preocupaciones
and
en materia de
indigenous
justicia
communities from
ambiental,
North
en
America
particular en el contexto
that
del cambio
address
climático.
environmental justice,
Durante el
especially on
taller
climate change
se
context. During the
intercambiaron
workshop,
relatos y
we
historias de procesos
exchanged
comunitarios exitosos,
histories and
estrategias y
experiences as well
lecciones
as
aprendidas,
strategies and lessons
pero
learned.
también se
But
identificaron
also,
brechas y
we
obstáculos
identify
comunes para
gaps
la
and
realización de
common
proyectos.
obstacles for a
Las
project,
personas
and
participantes
people
empezaron
that
a aclarar
participated
las metas y
started
objetivos de la red,
clarifying the
identificaron
objectives of
algunos de
the
los
network,
próximos
and
pasos
they
para
also
avanzar en su
identify
desarrollo y
the next
consolidación.
steps for their
Una cosa es
consolidation
segura,
and
es que se
development.
destacó
One
el
thing that is sure
potencial y la
is that
importancia de
the
crear y
importance
consolidar
of
una tal
creating
red
and
trinacional
consolidating a
para
trinational
conectar
network
a
was
comunidades y organizaciones para que
generated in order to
compartan
help
información y
communities
recursos
to
con el
share
propósito último de
resources
impulsar las
in order
iniciativas de
to
justicia ambiental
promote
en
the
toda América del Norte.
initiatives of environmental justice
Es
in
un gran
North
placer de
America.
tener hoy
It
con
is a
nosotros a
pleasure
dos personas
to
que
have
participaron en el
today
taller
two
trinacional.
people that participated in that
Así que, como lo
trinational
decía, como
workshop.
parte del
So
segundo
as I was
segmento de
saying,
esta
as part of the
presentación,
second segment of
nos
this
van a contar
presentation,
sus historias.
they will tell us their stories.
Como lo hicieron los
As
oradores anteriores, pero
the
también
previous
hablaron de su
speakers
visión de
did,
una red
but
de
they also
comunidades en favor de
talked
la
about their
justicia ambiental
vision
al nivel
of a
norteamericano.
trinational
Así que le doy
network at a
primero la
North
palabra
American level.
a
So
Marley
I will
Kozak,
pass the
encargada de
floor
los
first to
programas
Marley
nacionales
Kozak.
de la
She's in
Organización
charge of the
Canadiense
national
de
program
Resilience Institute.
from the Resilience Institute, and she's from Canada.
Esa organización también, tengo que mencionar, recibió una subvención del primer ciclo de
I also have
EJ4Climate.
to mention that this
Adelante, Marley.
organization received a grant from the first version of EJ4Climate. Marley, please go ahead.
All right, is that on? Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here and watching our panel. My name is Marley Kozak, and I work with the Resilience Institute, which is a national charitable organization based out of Canada. At the Resilience Institute, we work with communities to minimize suffering caused by climate change impacts and to build climate change adaptation resiliency in small, rural, and Indigenous communities. Our programs focus largely on education, knowledge sharing, and applied research. So we're out here really looking to solve a problem and putting that into action. As Violaine just mentioned, we also received a EJ4Climate grant, and through that funding, we implemented the Seeding the Future, adaptation to climate impacts through healthy ecosystems in traditional plants in the Piikani First Nation. The Resilience Institute and the Piikani First Nation have been working together for over 7 years now, and I just want to mention how much of an honor it is that I get to sit up here and share with all of you stories about our partnerships and our relationships and the work that we've done, and also let you know a little bit more about the nation that we're working with.
So Pagani is a member of the Blackfoot Confederacy located in southern Alberta, and they are in a really unique environment of prairie grasslands, montane forests, and they're kind of nestled at the base of the foothills of the Canadian Rocky Mountains. So it's a really beautiful area. The Pagani people have a strong connection to land and a strong sense of place, and they actively practice and engage in traditional ceremonies and practices. We've heard a lot about community struggles these last few days. Not so different. Pagani suffer from droughts and floods and wildfires, loss of biodiversity, food insecurity, and to make matters worse, these challenges have additional stressors from things like change of water flows due to dams, overgrazing of their traditional lands, and Western farming practices. So in this photo, you will see the sweetgrass plant. Sweetgrass is a culturally significant plant to the Pagani people, but also to many Indigenous peoples worldwide. Sweetgrass is grown in wetlands, marshes, and meadows. And unfortunately, these ecosystems are declining due to human impact and the climate crisis. So through our 7 years of work with the Pagani Nation, we have done extensive community engagement as well as desktop data research to identify the nation's climate risks as well as their adaptation priorities. So we've been educating and knowledge sharing through smaller mechanisms like a one-pager on climate change and the climate risks that the nation faces, and also larger, more robust mechanisms like climate risk assessments that we share with the community. We are also working with the youth of the nation on 3 initiatives right now. One of them is a Stories of Resilience project where it gives the students the opportunity to learn about climate change and then also share their stories about like local climate impacts and resilience and climate justice as well. The other program we're working on is we are building a greenhouse in the community to help combat food security. And we are also working with the students to develop and implement a composting program. In this photo, you can see Dr. Cynthia Lane kneeling on the ground. She is a biologist, and then some staff and community members from the Pagani Nation. What they're doing here is they are taking sweetgrass samples. So we were working with a bunch of different partners to try to determine the benefits of planting sweetgrass for enhancing biodiversity in native prairie grasslands, as well as to sequester carbon. So thanks to our partners at the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, we have been able to prove that sweetgrass is actually highly beneficial and efficient at sequestering carbon. So that was really exciting. So our next steps are to build more partnerships, work with other Indigenous communities, municipalities around where the nation is located, as well as landowners to find locations where we can grow sweetgrass and also plant it. There's a lot of challenges in our line of work, and these aren't explicitly related to the Pagani Nation. We are seeing this with all of the communities that we work with, and it's very similar to what I've been hearing over the last few days. One big one that we see is that our communities are often excluded from policy and decision making. And the policy and decision making is on topics that impact the community's economic, environmental, and political self-determination. We saw that a lot yesterday in conversations that policies are being made and the people that the policies are being made for are not being involved. We're finding community change adaptation plans climate change adaptation plans are not community specific. National and global plans are great, but they are not relevant to the pressing needs of the community that we are working with. They're often lengthy to implement, and they're very, very expensive to implement. And then another big obstacle that we're seeing is the delay between planning and action. And so a lot of the times a plan will be created, but by the time it goes to be implemented, the plan is already delayed. So one thing the Resilience Institute has done is created a adaptation action fund, which donors can directly contribute to. And our goal is to use that fund to bridge the gap between planning and action. And now this brings me to sort of the final point of my discussion with everyone, and that's on the value and the benefits of a environmental justice network. I was fortunate enough to attend the workshop that Violaine mentioned back in November. That workshop brought together community champions, environmental justice leaders to discuss community-based climate change adaptation and resilience. I went in a little tentative. I thought there was going to be a lot of heaviness, but I walked away feeling amazing. It was a beautiful opportunity for knowledge exchange, success sharing, and really relationship building. So I think for the Resilience Institute specifically, the network is great because it helps to strengthen our work in local communities, and it creates pathways for us to engage and share knowledge and create communities of practice around allyship and environmental justice. And in the future, we're hoping that this network might advance a project that we are trying to facilitate, which is working with a sister community in the South on traditional plants and storytelling. And then just generally, I think that a network is so great to build and strengthen transdisciplinary partnerships between local and Indigenous governments, academia, government, non-governmental organizations. And when you have those strong networks, you can share good practices and we can learn from one another. So to finish my talk, I would like to end it with an old proverb, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Marley. Sí, tiene mucho sentido lo que acabas de decir y bueno, te quería
Thank you so
agradecer
much,
por
Marley. That
hacer
makes a
parte
lot of
de esta
sense, actually. And
conversación
thank you
acerca de
so
la red
much
y
for
también de
being
Resilience
part of
Institute.
that
Ahora
conversation around the
vamos a
network and the
invitar a
Research
nuestro
Institute.
último
So
orador
now
del
we
día,
have our final speaker of
que
the day,
debe estar en línea,
who
si lo
should be
podemos ver por
joining
la
us online
pantalla,
now. Maybe we can see him on the screen.
a Jaciel Soto Torres.
We have with us Jaciel Soto Torres.
Hola, buenos días, Jaciel.
Good morning,
Jaciel es
Jaciel.
un miembro orgulloso de la
Jaciel
etnia
is a
indígena Cucapá
proud
en
member
Baja
of the
California,
Cucapá Indigenous community located in the
Jaciel
state of Baja
participó
California in
también en el
Mexico.
taller de la Red de
Jaciel also
Comunidades
took
en Favor
part
de la Justicia
in the
Ambiental y nos va a
EJ4Climate
compartir su
Communities
historia
Network
y su perspectiva
workshop,
de
and
la
he'll
red
share with us
internacional.
his
Adelante, Jaciel.
perspective and experience from working in the
Hola, buenos días
international
a
network.
todos. No sé si me
Good
escuchan.
morning, everybody. I
Sí
hope
te
you can all hear
escuchamos.
me. Yes, loud and
Ok,
clear.
espero no tener problemas debido a
I
que
hope I don't
pues,
have
las altas
any
temperaturas acá en Baja
network
California
issues.
son
We are
altas
experiencing
y
very
pues
high
este,
temperatures
se
in Baja
sobrecalienta, ¿no? La red
California,
eléctrica
and
y
our
muchas veces
electrical
tenemos
grid is
dificultades en eso.
overheating, so
Espero
it's
no
causing
quedarme
a
sin
lot of
internet.
issues. So I hope my internet doesn't cut out.
Bueno,
Well,
me presento brevemente.
let
Yo
me
me llamo
introduce
Jaciel
myself.
Soto
I am
Torres,
Jaciel Soto Torres, Ocana Achapay,
Emul
Guapa,
Jaciel Soto Torres, Nipeyo,
Emul Jaciel Soto
indígena
Torres.
Cucapal Mayor.
I am
Mi
indigenous
presencia en lengua,
from
yo soy de
Cucapá el
una
Mayor.
comunidad indígena, una
I
de las
come from
tantas reservas
one
en
of
el territorio
many
Cucapá.
indigenous reserve communities in the Cucapá
Y pues soy indígena
territory.
Cucapá.
I am
Actualmente estudio una carrera en ingeniería en acuacultura y
Cucapá native. I
piscicultura
am
y también
currently
realizo
studying
trabajos en mi comunidad en el tema de
agricultural
preservación cultural
engineering, and I'm working in my
y pues también
community
estoy
in cultural
trabajando en la
preservation and
reconstrucción del tejido
conservation,
social.
also working in reconstructing our social
Pues para
fabric.
entrar un poco en contexto, no sé si me
And
podrían
to provide a bit more
pasar la
context,
foto
maybe you
donde
could help me by
para
switching
iniciar mi presentación.
to the next slide.
Hola.
Hello?
Ok, bueno, para entrar un poco en contexto, ¿no? Voy a
Right,
empezar a
let's
hablar
start with a
sobre
bit
identidad
of
y territorio
context. And for this, I
y
will talk
después
about
se
identity
va a
and
dar a entender la
territory.
problemática que
And with this, you'll
tenemos
be able to
en Cucapá.
understand our
Bueno,
main
nosotros
problems
nos
in
encontramos
the
en la parte
Cucapá
de Baja California
Nation. We are
y también
located
en la
in the
parte,
state of Baja
tenemos
California,
territorio
and our
reservas en la
territory
parte de Sonora
expands to
tenemos una
reservations
reserva que se
in
llama
the
Pozos de
state of
Arbizu.
Sonora. There is a reservation called Pozas de
Somerton
de
tenemos
Arbizu,
también otras
and in
reservas
Yuma and
importantes.
Somerton,
Somos
there are other
reconocidos como
significant
una etnia
reserves. We are
binacional
acknowledged as a
y también
binational ethnic group,
conformamos parte del grupo
and we are part
etnolingüístico
of the
humano,
ethno-linguistic and
el cual
human group,
conforma diferentes, distintas
which
comunidades
encompasses
indígenas.
different indigenous
Todas
communities.
tenemos una
All
relación
of
muy íntima
us
con
are
el río Colorado.
very
Como podemos
closely
observar,
related
parte
to
de
the
las
Colorado River.
comunidades
And
indígenas
as you can see, many of
del
our
grupo etnolingüístico y
indigenous
humanos se
communities
encuentran
in this human and
ubicadas
ethno-linguistic
en
group
las márgenes del río
are
Colorado.
located along the
Mm,
edges of the Colorado
Bueno, nosotros
River.
tenemos esta relación muy íntima, incluso
We have this
las
very
comunidades que no
tight-knit
pertenecen
communities,
que no están asentadas
and
en las
even
márgenes del río
those which are
Colorado,
not
como es el
settled
caso de
along the
Quirigua,
river,
Paipai,
which is the case
Mirai,
of Paipai,
ellos
Kiriwa,
incluso reconocen
they
el
themselves
vínculo con el río
acknowledge
Colorado,
the
¿no?
link
Nosotros, a
to the
través de la
Colorado
transmisión
River.
de conocimientos, ¿no? De historias
By transmitting
tradicionales,
our
ancestrales,
stories and our
reconocemos
traditional
que
knowledge,
nosotros venimos de la parte
we
alta del río
acknowledge that we
Colorado
come from
y pues
the
todas nuestras
upper Colorado
hermanas
River,
indígenas del
and
grupo
all our
humano,
indigenous
pues
brothers and
son
sisters
pues reconocidas como un grupo
from
hermano, ¿no?
this ethnic group are
También podemos
acknowledged
observar que
as a
pues
sibling group.
nosotros, como estamos en la parte baja del río Colorado, en el delta
We
del río
can see that
Colorado,
we are
como
located
sabemos
in
la
the lower
mayoría, pues
delta of the
tenemos
Colorado
nosotros las
River,
comunidades rurales
and
en la parte
many
baja
of
del
our
río, pues tenemos
communities
las
are
mayores
rural.
afectaciones ambientales, ¿no? En este
Therefore, we
caso,
are
pues
experiencing a lot
nosotros,
of
nuestra principal
climate-related
problemática es en el tema del
impacts.
agua.
Our main
Como
issue right
podemos
now
observar en
is
este
water.
mapa, bueno, mi lado derecho,
If you can see
están
on the
ubicadas
right
las
side of the map,
presas, ¿no? Que pues han retenido el agua
these are the
del
locations of
curso
the
natural del
main
río Colorado, ¿no?
dams that have stopped the natural flow of
A
the
través
Colorado
de
River.
acuerdos binacionales, bueno, quiero
Through
puntualizar un poco, ¿no?
binational
Uno
agreements,
de
but
nuestros
well,
principales
before that,
problemáticas que
I would like
tenemos
to specify that one of our
obstáculos,
main
¿no? Que pues es en el tema
issues and
del SILA, ¿no? De la
obstacles
Comisión Internacional de Límites del Agua,
comes from
quien es el que tiene el control, ¿no? El
SILA,
manejo
the
de gestión
International Committee
recurso
of
del
Water
agua, ¿no? Del
Boundaries,
cauce
and
natural
they
del
are
río
the ones who
Colorado.
manage the natural stem and flow
A
of the
través de
Colorado
la
River.
retención del agua a través de las presas,
They
¿no?
are withholding water
Aquí el
through
problema
the
que
use
nosotros
of
tenemos
dams.
es
And
el
one of
problema
our
de que no
main
somos
issues
incluidos
is
en
that
las
we are
actas o
not
acuerdos
being
que se realizan
included in the
entre México y
minutes
Estados
and
Unidos
agreements
a
celebrated
través del
between
SILA,
Mexico
donde
through
pues sí
SILA
se
and
ve
its counterpart in
ha
the US,
involucrado,
the
eso
International
creo que en
Boundary
el
and Water
2013
Commission
se
and the
involucró lo
IBWC.
que es
I
a los
think
agricultores
it was
y
in
también por
2013 when
intervención de
agricultural
organizaciones
producers were
civiles
involved, and also
ambientales,
through
ambientalistas,
the
se han
incidents of
hecho
environmental
tratados en el SILA
associations.
para mandar
Agreements
lo que
have
se reconoce
been
como flujos
again
pulso,
signed
lo cual
by
son cantidades
SILA
de
and the
agua específicamente
IBWC
para
regarding the
áreas
water
destinadas a la
flows
conservación, manejadas por asociaciones
destined
civiles
for conservation and managed by
pues
civil
se ha visto involucrado
associations.
últimamente también pues las asociaciones civiles, ¿no?
Lately,
Durante
all
la
these
creación
decisions have been
del SILA,
involved,
pues
and the
nosotros no
creation of
hemos sido
SILA
parte, ¿no? De estos
has
acuerdos, ¿no?
not
Donde hoy en
brought
día
us on board
incluso ya se han
in these agreements.
realizado pagos económicos
Even
a
nowadays,
México debido a
Mexico has
que pues
received
en las presas Hoover, principalmente que es la más grande en
funding,
el río Colorado, se
especially
almacena agua, ¿no? Y cuando
because
México
in Hoover
no
Dam,
ocupa de esta
there is a
agua,
lot
pues
of
entonces
water
se le
being
da una
stored. And if
compensación
Mexico is
económica,
not
¿no?
using
Aunque pues
or
nosotros
does
no
not receive
recibamos
benefits from this water, we
dinero,
receive
¿no? En
a,
sí, lo que queremos más que nada
compensation
es pues que se restaure,
in
¿no? El
funds and
ecosistema del
money.
río Colorado
But
y que
what we
haya más agua
want
porque
is
pues
to have
nosotros
the environment restored.
históricamente hasta la actualidad somos
Historically,
pescadores, somos reconocidos como una etnia indígena pescadora.
we are
Incluso nos vemos
acknowledged
nosotros
as
mismos como
a
gente del agua,
fishing
gente del río.
community. We
No sé si
acknowledge
pudiera
ourselves as the people of water or
darle a la
people of the
siguiente
river.
imagen.
And next slide, please.
No, es otra.
No,
Bueno, igual también
next.
aquí, pues, bueno, si pueden la de atrás.
Go back, please. One back. Thank you.
Bueno, aquí también incluso podemos
Right.
ver, ¿no? Lo que causa, ¿no? La retención
So
del
in
agua
this
durante
image, we can
ya
see what
bastantes tiempo, ¿no?
this withholding of water can cause over a long
Pues este es
period of
el delta del
time.
río Colorado,
This is
¿no?
the delta of the
Es un
Colorado
delta, ¿no? Ya
River.
conocemos que es la unión entre un río
We know that
y
the
el mar, ¿no? En
delta
este caso,
is
lo que se ve al fondo, pues
where
es
the
el Alto
river
Golfo, ¿no?
goes
Ya no hay
into the
una
sea, and
conexión
this is the upper Gulf.
tanta como
There's
era
no
antes,
longer a
donde
connection
pues podemos ver la
between the
degradación
river
ambiental también
and
aquí
the sea.
dirigida a un
We
tipo
can
de
see
pastizal, ¿no?
this
Muy único, ¿no? En
environmental
estos ecosistemas,
degradation.
¿no?
There was a very particular type
Aquí
of
pues
grassland in
podemos
this
observar lo
ecosystem,
que causa, ¿no?
and we can
Incluso
see the
esto es el delta,
effects.
pero
This is
nosotros
actually the
también
delta,
tenemos en nuestro
but
territorio una laguna, ¿no?
in
Que
our
se llama Laguna
territory, we
Salada.
also
Esta
have
pues ya
a
totalmente es un
lagoon,
desierto, ¿no?
which
Pero a mis
is
escasos 8
completely
minutos que tengo
desertified
para
now. So I have a
intervenir en
very
esto,
brief 8 minutes
solamente puse el
for my
delta, ¿no?
presentation. So
Esto
I'm
pues ha
just
tenido degradación en el medio ambiente,
including
¿no? Como
the
comento,
delta.
pues nosotros
Again, there
estamos
was an
vinculados
environmental
a todo lo
degradation
que son los
already,
recursos naturales
and
del
we
río
are
Colorado y
closely
el río
linked to the
Colorado en sí.
natural
Y
resources
pues esto
from
ha
the
no
Colorado
ha
River and
permitido
the
que
river
crezcan
itself.
árboles, ¿no?
But
Como los
this
sauces.
has
Ahora
not
sí se
allowed
pueden
trees like the
adelantar
willow
unas
to grow anymore.
imágenes.
So
Otra,
can you please move forward a few slides?
otra, por favor.
One more, please.
No, otra.
No, one more.
No.
Nope.
Es que faltó otra imagen
I think I'm
donde,
missing
bueno, si
an
pueden poner la
image
del
there.
mapa.
Can we go back to the map?
Es que está una imagen, bueno, no está.
It's
Pero
not there,
bueno, aquí
but anyway.
se alcanza a ver un poco en el
I think
mapa
you can
de donde
probably
están las
still
presas.
see it here
En
in
punto
the map
rojo se
with
encuentra
the
la comunidad del
dams.
Mayor.
There's a
Nosotros
red
no
dot
estamos
where
cerca,
we
¿no? De lo que
find
es el cauce natural del río
our
Colorado.
Cucapal
Bueno,
Mayor
el
community. Now,
cauce
we are not
principal.
near
Nosotros
the main
estamos
stem of the
ubicados, nuestra
Colorado
comunidad,
River.
a escasos
Our
200
community
metros de lo
is
que viene siendo un río, bueno, perdón,
barely
un brazo del
200
río
meters
Colorado
away
que se llama
from
Río
one of the
Harvey.
tributaries
Este
of the
río,
Colorado River,
como
which
no
is the Harvey
está
River.
situado en las partes
This river
principales del
is
río
not
Colorado,
located along the main sections of
el
the
agua
Colorado
que ha
River.
solicitado las
So the
asociaciones civiles
water that our civil
no ha llegado
associations have
realmente a la
requested
comunidad, ¿no?
has
Como
not
podemos observar
reached
nuestro
our
punto rojo,
community.
pues no
We
estamos
can see that
ubicados en
red
esta parte,
dot,
¿no?
which
Sino que
means
está
that we are not located along
nosotros
that
en el
main
río que
stem.
estamos en el río Harvey,
So
pues
we're
antes
closer to the Harvey
el
River,
río cuando se venían las
and
bajadas, ¿no? De hielo por el río Colorado en la
when the
parte alta,
Colorado River,
lograba llenarse, pues lo
when
que es
the
el delta,
ice
¿no?
was
Incluso
coming
el
down
río pues se juntaba
the
con el
river
río
stem,
Hartley
it used to join the
y
Hartley
pues
River,
llegaban
and
estas
we would get
cantidades de agua. Hoy en
water
día, pues por la
in
retención
that
ya no
way
llega
in
esta
large
agua a la
volumes. But
comunidad.
now that
El
water is
agua que
not
estamos
reaching our
recibiendo es
community. It is
agua
being withheld in
que
the
es agua
dams.
de
The
las,
water we
pues, de
receive
un
now
complejo de
actually
tratamiento de aguas
comes
residuales
from
en la ciudad de
a
Mexicali.
wastewater
También agua
treatment
de
plant
irrigación
from the
de
city of
agricultura también
Mexicali.
se mezcla,
And
¿no?
then we
Con las aguas
also have a
residuales no
lot of water
tratadas, pero pues a
from
fin de cuentas es agua, ¿no? Que ya no es
agricultural
100%
activities
natural
that
del río
is being
Colorado.
treated, and it's
Aquí
no
hemos
longer
tenido
100% natural
dificultades en la
coming
pesca, que
from
es
the
una de las
river.
principales
This is
actividades de
impacting one of
subsistencia.
our main
Antes también éramos
activities,
agricultores,
which is
cazadores,
fishing for our
recolectores
livelihood. We
y
also
estas
used to be
últimas
hunters and gatherers.
actividades
And
pues
these
ya no las
activities have
practicamos
all been
por las
seriously
mismas
impacted to the
causas de
point that we
degradación
no
del medio
longer
ambiente, ¿no?
carry them out because of the
Esto
environmental
pues también
degradation.
también tiene problemáticas en lo que es la
This
preservación
also
cultural. Ahora
brings
sí pueden
about a lot
pasar
of
la siguiente
issues in
imagen, por favor.
conserving our culture. Next, please.
Otra.
One more.
Ok, aquí. Bueno, yo en las actividades de preservación cultural, pues mi enfoque
So
es
as
mucho
part
con
of
los jóvenes, ¿no?
these cultural
Actualmente nosotros en
preservation
la comunidad del
activities, we
Mayor
have focused on working with
ya no
younger
tenemos
people.
ancianos, ¿no?
In the
No
El
tenemos
Mayor
ancianos, es
community,
algo muy triste
the
que
elders have
sucede.
all
En otras
departed,
comunidades, en otras
which
reservas
is
del pueblo
very
Cucapá, pues sí,
sad.
sí existen
In other
ancianos, pero
communities along the
nosotros pues ya
Kukapa
no contamos con
reservations,
ancianos,
there
¿no?
are elders, but all
Pues
our
esto también
elders
ha
are
traído
gone.
problemáticas en la
This
preservación
has
cultural, como
also
podemos
implied a
observar.
lot of
Mi
issues in
abuela
preserving
está
our
en la parte
culture.
en la parte
The
izquierda.
picture on the left is a picture
Ella,
of my
pues, en sus
grandmother,
manos tiene una falda de
and
corteza,
she's
¿no? Que pues
holding
es
in her
es
hands
parte de la vestimenta tradicional
a
y
skirt,
pues es
which
parte
is
de los
part of our
conocimientos
traditional
tradicionales, ¿no? Que
costume, and it was
tenemos. El
part of our
sauce es un
traditional
árbol para nosotros muy
knowledge.
sagrado
This
porque
comes from
nos
the
da
willow
los
tree. The
materiales
willow
para
tree
la
is sacred
creación de
for
otro
us. It
tipo de
provides
herramientas, ¿no?
materials to
Muchas
create
herramientas
other
para la
tools,
medicina
lots of
tradicional, para
tools even
muchas
for our
cosas se utiliza el
traditional
sauce, ¿no?
medicine
Pero el sauce
and
tiene
for
mm,
many other things. However, the willow tree requires high levels of humidity and moisture and water. And since I was 9 years old, I've not seen any willow bark around. I don't see any willow trees close to our community anymore. They're very far away. There are some in areas that are managed by civil associations for conservation. But I just want to bring to your attention that there is massive social inequality in our community. There's a lack of interest from the government, from both countries, Mexico and the USA, because they are not involving us in binational agreements. This has brought about huge problems in our social fabric because it is very difficult for us to survive. We are experiencing very high temperatures. Yesterday, the news mentioned that we are the hottest city in the world. This is the city of Mexicali. There's also an abandonment from the institutions, which has not allowed us to develop projects for resilience to climate change. And I would love to talk to you about projects that could be implemented in our community. There were a few, but there is huge social inequality, and that makes it very difficult. So I could perhaps mention that I participated in the EJ Communities Workshop in Oaxaca. And I could say that there is no limit to climate-related problems. We have been bound by that perimeter fence between Mexico and the US, but climate-related issues know no borders. And we're trying to do the best we can with what little resources we have left. For me, the communities network, if you can move to the last image, please. Well, this one too. Here's an image that I included to show how important fishing is for us. Historically, fishing has represented our livelihood, and I'm studying engineering. So I have a lot of ideas that I want to develop and work with different alternatives for our own livelihood that are not that different from our traditional practices when it comes to fishing. And my intention is to bring these alternatives through aquaculture. But again, there's a complete abandonment from the institutions for our projects. And this even relates to the vision that we have for our own community. There's always an imposition from the different government institutions and government entities that just come in thinking that we have these needs when actually our needs are different. I would also like to mention that it is very important for us to ask the governments to please align with the internal agendas of the communities. More often than not, our problems are different to theirs. Can we please move to the next image? Thank you. Again, this is part of the network of communities I've worked in. I've taken part in other youth communities. They are guardians of the territory from CONAMP. And through my own struggle, through my own fight and trying to preserve our culture, I've come in contact with different networks. On this occasion, through the communities network, thanks to the CEC, I was able to meet Luis, who was also part of this project. And that's where our network grew further out. We are currently working on a binational coalition, and I have been brought on board to the coalition's activities. So I am providing this indigenous perspective, and I've acted as a liaison with
como es el grupo Cochimí, que está,
The
nos
Kochimi
tomamos una
group,
foto, ¿no? Del lado
our
derecho.
brother group,
Y
that's the
pues sí,
picture
¿no? La
on
importancia
your right-hand
de las
side.
redes, ¿no? Para
And
mí,
that's how
pues me ha
important the
ayudado mucho, ¿no?
networks
La
are.
transferencia de
It has been
conocimiento,
very
de
helpful
experiencias.
in the
Y
exchange
pues para
of
mí ha sido
experiences and
pues muy
knowledge,
valioso, ¿no?
and it has been
Principalmente por las
extremely
personas que
valuable,
se logran conocer,
mainly
¿no? En las
because
redes
of the
con
people
estos
that we get to
inquietudes, ¿no?
meet through
Y
these
valores, ¿no?
networks and
Hacia el medio
sharing our
ambiente.
concerns and
Y,
values related to the
y no sé
environment.
si ya se me pasó el tiempo porque me
It
comentaban que
might
eran
be over
8
time
minutos.
because I was told it was 8 minutes.
Bueno, pues nada, ok.
All right,
Ciencia,
thank you.
tu historia, que no es solo la
Your
tuya, es de
story,
la,
which is
de
not
tu
only your
comunidad,
story,
de
it
tu
is
gente.
the story of
Es
your
muy
community,
fuerte,
of your
algo
people.
seguro.
It is
Y bueno, estamos muy
hard to
contentos de
hear,
tenerte
but we are
como
very
parte
happy
de esta
to
red
have you as
y
part of this
esperamos que
network.
el trabajo nos
And
va a
we
llevar,
hope
bueno, les va a llevar más adelante.
this
Muchísimas
work will
gracias.
take you further. Thank you very
Donc
much.
maintenant, nous allons passer à la dernière portion de cette présentation. Comme vous pouvez l'imaginer, la création d'un réseau
Let's
trinational est pas
continue to
nécessairement une
the
tâche
following
facile.
of our session.
Donc, parce qu'il fallait trouver un moyen de réunir
Having
les
a
membres
trinational
de
network
ce
is not
réseau
an easy
à un
work
seul endroit et
because
leur
we
donner
had to
l'opportunité
find
de raconter
the
leur histoire.
way to bring together all the
Excellent.
members
Prochaine
of that network to share their stories.
Nous avons
Next
créé
slide, please.
une story
We
map
have created
en
for
ligne.
that purpose a
Donc,
map,
nous en sommes bien sûr au premier
a
balbutiement de
story
ce
map
réseau, mais déjà, vous pouvez
online.
accéder à la story map en utilisant le code
We
QR
are on the
qui
first
était
steps of our
disponible
network,
sur
but you
l'écran.
all can already
Bref, puis ici, on va vous faire
access
une
this
petite
story map
démonstration de ce à quoi ça
by
ressemble. Donc, cette story map
scanning the
réunit
QR
les
code on
différents
the
profils,
screen.
donc des gens qui étaient
This
présents,
is
des
a story
organismes,
map.
des
I will
communautés qui
talk a
étaient
little bit
présentes
more about the
lors
tool. This is a
de
story
l'atelier
map. In this
trinational
map,
qui a eu lieu
we
en
can see
novembre
the
au Mexique.
profile of the
Et puis
different
aussi,
stakeholders that
les profils de
participated
tous
in
nos
the
orateurs, tous
workshop
nos
on
invités
Oaxaca
d'aujourd'hui.
in November.
Donc, vous pouvez
Here you
retrouver
can
sur
also
cette carte
find the profile of all
plusieurs
today's
informations qu'ils ont
speakers.
partagées aujourd'hui dans leur présentation. Mais il y a
And
aussi leur contact
this map
personnel,
can
donc des
allow
adresses
you to
courriel.
access to
Il
different
y a
types of
aussi
information, such as the one you heard
donc
today.
leur site
And you can
Internet. Ils
also
ont aussi
find
parfois
their
inclus des vidéos,
contact
des liens
information
vers justement des
and
ressources.
the
Donc,
link
c'est le
to
but
their
ultime donc, de
websites.
cette story map, c'est
Some
de pouvoir permettre
profiles
aux
also
gens, aux
included
organisations, aux
resources such as
communautés de pouvoir
video.
partager leur
The
histoire,
purpose
mais
of
aussi de
this
pouvoir
map is
partager
to
des
allow
ressources.
communities and
Donc, je vais revenir
people to
ici.
share their stories and resources.
Is there a way to come back to the QR code, please? Thank you. Donc, elle peut être consultée sur votre téléphone, mais optimalement, c'est sur un ordinateur qu'on peut travailler avec
You
cette
can
story map-là. Avec le téléphone, je vous dirais
access
qu'en
the
version
map
en
through
format
your cell
horizontal,
phone,
ça
but it
sort
is better
vraiment
to
mieux.
do it
Donc,
in your
on va
computer.
maintenant
And
conclure
if
avec
you
cette
do it
présentation.
on
Il est
your
presque
phone,
11h30.
I recommend you to
Bon, bien
use
sûr, je
your
désire encore
cell
une fois
phone
remercier nos 7
horizontally.
invités d'aujourd'hui qui
It
ont
is
été
time to
très
wrap up the
généreux et
meeting because
généreuses
it
dans
is
leur
already
présentation et
11:30.
avec lesquels c'est
Thank you
un
very
honneur pour
much to
moi et
all the
pour, je peux
speakers.
parler au nom de tous mes collègues
It has
de
been
la
an
commission.
honor,
C'est un honneur de
and I
collaborer
speak
pour
on
le programme
behalf of my
EJ4Climate et le
colleagues
réseau de
from the
collectivités pour la
CEC.
justice
It is
environnementale.
an
Donc, les histoires et les
pleasure
exemples
to
très concrets
collaborate with
d'actions et de
you through
stratégies
the
qui sont mises en œuvre dans le cadre
community
de votre travail
network
sont
for
clairement une grande
environmental
source
justice as
d'inspiration,
well as in the
mais surtout, ils sont directement
EJ4Climate.
en lien avec le
The
thème de la
strategies
session
that
du
you showed
Conseil de
us
cette
are
année,
a
renforcer la
great
justice
inspiration,
environnementale
and
grâce à
also every
l'autonomisation des
as
collectivités.
they are
Donc, vous avez pu
related
comprendre
to
que le
this
fil conducteur aussi qu'il y
year's
avait à travers toute
topic,
cette
which is
présentation,
reinforcing
c'était la
environmental
question de
justice.
l'autonomisation des collectivités.
So
Si vous désirez en savoir plus donc sur les programmes de la
the
commission,
point,
EJ4
the
Climate
purpose
et
of the
le
presentations
réseau de
was to
collectivités pour la
talk
justice
about the
environnementale, il y a des
empowerment of
pages dédiées
communities.
sur
But if you
notre
want to learn
site
more
Internet.
about the
Bien sûr aussi, si vous
environmental
désirez
justice
être
community
tenu
network, you
au
can
courant
you can
des
go to
prochaines
our
vagues de financement
website.
pour nos programmes de
And
financement
also,
ou
if
encore
you
vous
want to
voulez
get more
en connaître
information
plus
about
sur les
the
développements concernant
following
le réseau de collectivités pour la justice
stages
environnementale, la
of
Story Map
the
ou encore
grant
des
program,
webinaires
or
qui
if
seront
you want to get to
organisés
know
pour
more
un
about
partage de ressources et
the story
d'expériences
map
en matière
or
de justice environnementale, vous pouvez nous
future
contacter ou nous laisser vos
webinars
coordonnées à l'adresse
regarding
courriel qui
environmental
apparaît
justice,
présentement.
you can contact us to the email that you will see on the screen. Thank you very much to the audience in here and online. And I want to remind you to send your questions to the speakers because we didn't have time to for a Q&A session. There should be a link on the chat for people online.
Vous êtes aussi invité à remplir un
If
questionnaire
you
d'appréciation. Je crois qu'il y a un code QR.
If
qui est
you
là à
add your
votre
email
disposition. Il y a un lien
address, you
pour ça
will
aussi.
receive a
Et finalement, il y a
reply.
aussi
There's
deux
also a
dernières
QR code,
questions
so you
qu'on
can
pose
give
au
us your
public via
insight about
l'application
this
Slido. Donc, on
meeting.
apprécierait grandement
We
si vous avez
have
la chance de pouvoir
two
répondre à
questions,
ces
two poll
questions.
questions
Donc, je vous souhaite tous une excellente journée.
that we
Et
wanted
je
to
vous
ask the
remercie grandement
audience
encore une
through
fois pour
Slido.
votre attention.
I
Merci à
hope you
tous.
can answer them. Thank you very much again for your attention and have a nice day.